They said the forest was cursed, that anyone who heard a tree cry would never return the same. Adaora heard it anyway. That evening, as the sun bled into the red dust of the Igbo village, a young maiden walked alone into the forbidden forest, her back bent under a load of firewood, her heart heavier than the burden she carried. She did not know that before the night ended, she would hear a tree weep like a broken man, or that the voice trapped inside that tree was once a prince who chose love over fear and paid for it with his freedom. She was only a girl nobody loved, a stepdaughter beaten, starved, and silenced, but destiny had been waiting for her, rooted deep in the forest, crying, calling her name, and when she turned on to run, fate refused to let her go. Kindly subscribe for more stories. Adaora was known in the village for her beauty and her gentle heart, yet her life carried more pain than joy. She was the kind of girl elders pointed at and said, "That child has good spirit," because she greeted everyone with respect and never spoke with anger, even when her heart was heavy. When Adaora was still very small, her mother fell sick in a strange way. One day she was strong, the next day she could not stand. Before the moon completed its cycle, she was gone. People whispered in low voices, death came too fast, but nothing was ever proven. Adaora only remembered her mother's warm hands and the way she sang to her at night. After her burial, the house became quiet, and so did Adora's laughter. Her father tried to be strong, but loneliness pushed him to marry again. He brought home a woman named Ugoma, tall, sharp-eyed, and cold-faced. At first, Ugoma smiled and spoke softly. But once the bride price was settled and her feet were firm in the compound, her true heart came out like a hidden thorn. From that day, Adora's life changed. One morning before the cock could crow twice, Ugoma kicked her gently with her foot and said, "Get up, lazy girl. Go and fetch water before people fill the stream." Adaora rubbed her eyes and answered softly, "Yes, Mama," while other children still slept. She carried a heavy clay pot to the stream. When she returned, Ugoma was already shouting, "Is this how slow you are? Firewood is waiting, food is not yet cooked." Adaora would rush to the kitchen, pounding yam, stirring soup, coughing from smoke, while Ugoma sat and watched. If the soup tasted too salty, Ugoma would say, "Are you trying to poison us?" If it lacked salt, she would shout, "Are you cooking for goats?" Adora's father sometimes looked at her with pity and said, "My daughter, endure." But he never stopped his wife. As the sun rose, Adaora went to the farm alone, clearing weeds until her palms burned. When she returned, she swept the compound, washed clothes by the river, and cleaned plates until her fingers wrinkled. At night, while Ugoma and her children spread mats and slept comfortably, Adaora laid her body on the cold floor near the kitchen door. Sometimes she whispered to herself, "Mama, if you were here, would my life be like this?" The night answered her with silence. Neighbors noticed her thin body and tired eyes. One woman once asked Ugoma, "Why is the girl always working?" Ugoma laughed and replied, "Work builds character." Adaora heard it and lowered her head. In that village, people shared food, laughter, and stories by moonlight. But none of it reached Adora's heart. She gave love, but received none. And so it was said, quietly and sadly, that in a village where love was shared freely, Adaora grew up with none. Every day in the house, Adaora lived under a cloud of words sharper than any knife. Ugoma would wake before the sun, her voice cutting through the quiet, calling, "Adaora, useless girl, come. Or will you sleep forever?" Adaora would rise quietly, keeping her head low, answering in a voice so soft it barely reached her own ears, "Yes, Mama." But no matter how quickly she moved, how carefully she worked, nothing was enough. Ugoma would slap her hand with a wooden spoon and snap, slow as a tortoise. Why did the gods make you so weak? Child of bad luck. You will bring shame to this house if you do not learn to serve properly. Adora's father would sit under the mango tree, his face pale and his eyes downcast. Sometimes he would clear his throat and murmur, Ugoma, do not be so harsh. But Ugoma only laughed, sharp and bitter, harsh. This girl must learn respect, or she will rot like spoiled yam in the sun. You say nothing, husband. Afraid I will see you weak, he would nod silently, afraid to speak, afraid to defend the daughter who clung to his side when no one else would. Even the villagers, who saw Adaora walking with empty pots and bowed shoulders, could only shake their heads. They whispered to one another at the well, poor child, she works from dawn to dusk. Her father loves her, but that woman is strong. Who will help her? No one dared cross Ugoma. Her temper was like a sudden thunderstorm, and anyone caught in it felt the wrath of a storm in full. On market days, when the village gathered to celebrate the new yam or watch dancers sway in bright clothes, Adaora was always left behind. Ugoma would call, "Stay in this house." Festivals are not for lazy girls who cannot sweep or cook properly. You will sit and count the shadows while others enjoy themselves. Adaora would watch from the window as children ran with laughter, as drums echoed through the village square, and she would fold her thin arms and sigh, hiding her tears behind her hair. One evening, as the moon climbed high, Adaora whispered to herself, "Why am I always the one punished? Why can no one see my heart?" The wind rustled through the leaves, and for a moment, she imagined it answering, carrying her sorrow through the night, but the silence returned, as it always did, leaving her in a house where words were sharp, love was absent. And every step she took was watched by eyes that judged, scolded, and scorned. And so it went, day after day, until the village knew that the child who should have been cherished, the girl with a kind heart and gentle spirit, lived in shadow. Ugoma's insults were as constant as the rising sun, Adora's father powerless to protect her, and the villagers' pity powerless to act. The festivals, the dances, the songs under the moonlight, they were hers only to see from afar, a reminder of a world that seemed made for everyone but her. One evening, as the sky turned a deep orange and the sun sank behind the hills, Ugoma's voice rang through the house like a whip. "Adaora, take your basket and go fetch firewood from the forest. The one near the village is all used up, and I will not have you wasting time with small sticks." Adora's heart sank. She had walked to the forest many times before, but never so deep, not past the part where the villagers whispered that spirits roamed. She lowered her eyes and whispered, "Yes, Mama," though her fingers trembled on the worn handle of the basket. Ugoma laughed. Sharp and cold. "What is that whispering? Speak clearly. Do you hear me? Or are you going to stand there like a dead tree?" Adaora bowed her head further. "I hear you, Mama." "I will go now." Her father, who sat quietly under the mango tree, glanced at her with worry. "Adaora, be careful," he said softly, his voice barely above a sigh. Ugoma's eyes flicked toward him, narrow and dangerous. "Careful. You dare speak. Do not interfere, husband. The girl will do as I say, or she will learn the cost of disobedience." He said nothing. As Adaora left the compound, the villagers were already closing their shops for the night. Old women shaking their heads whispered from behind clay pots and market baskets, "Child, be careful. That forest, it swallows people. Some who enter do not return." A group of children huddled together, peeking through the fence. "Do you think she will come back?" one asked. Another shook his head. "The elders say the forest is cursed. Even the brave fear it." Adaora kept walking, her bare feet silent on the red dirt path, but her heart pounded like a drum. She thought of the firewood she had to carry, of the angry voice of Ugoma when she failed, of the long night ahead if she disobeyed. She looked back once at the village, the smoke from cooking fires curling into the twilight sky, the silhouettes of the huts bathed in gold. She wanted to cry, to turn back, but she remembered the scolding, the strikes of the wooden spoon, the words that cut deeper than any blade. "Useless girl. Child of bad luck." "No," she whispered to herself. "I must go." She gripped her basket tighter. "I have no choice. I cannot stay. If I do not obey, she will beat me until I cannot walk." The forest loomed ahead, dark and silent, the trees tall and strange, their roots tangled like the fingers of giants. A cool breeze brushed her face, carrying with it a scent she could not name. Somewhere deep inside, she heard a faint rustle, and she shivered, her feet slowed. But she whispered again, I must go." The villagers' warnings echoed in her mind. That forest swallows people. That forest swallows people. But Adaora forced her feet forward, each step heavier than the last, the basket swaying with the weight of sticks she would soon collect. She did not know what waited for her in the heart of the forest, only that she could not disobey, only that she had no choice but to walk into the shadows that had terrified her since childhood. And so with a trembling heart and a basket in her hands, Adaora stepped past the boundary of the village, into the forest where the sun barely reached and where whispers of old stories and lost souls clung to the trees like moss. The forest swallowed her light, but she did not stop. She had no choice. Adaora moved slowly between the thick trunks of the forest, her small hands gripping the basket, her eyes searching for fallen branches and dry twigs. The light was fading, and shadows stretched like long fingers across the dirt path. The deeper she went, the quieter the forest became, until even the chirping of birds and the rustle of insects seemed to vanish. She bent to pick up a branch, then another, her heart thudding in her chest, when suddenly a soft sound reached her ears, a sound so strange, so sorrowful, that it made her stop and freeze. It was sobbing, gentle, almost human. Yet coming from the stillness around her, Adaora's breath caught. She whispered to herself, Who is crying in the forest at this hour?" The sound came again, muffled but unmistakable, a deep sorrow that tugged at her heart. Her small voice trembled as she asked, "Hello, is anyone there?" There was no answer, only the sobbing, now mixed with the soft rustle of leaves. Curiosity mingled with fear, and Adaora stepped closer, her bare feet brushing over tangled roots. The sobbing seemed to come from the largest tree she had ever seen. Its trunk was wide as a hut, its bark rough and dark, and its branches stretched high into the dimming sky. As she approached, she noticed something that made her heart seize. The leaves quivered, not from the wind, but as if the tree itself were shaking. Thick, amber sap ran down its bark, glistening in the last rays of sunlight like tears. Who are you?" Adaora whispered, her voice barely audible. She reached out a trembling hand to touch the trunk, and then she heard it, clear as day. "Adaora, Adaora." Her eyes widened. The tree was calling her name. Her knees shook. She took a step back, her basket tipping, twigs scattering across the forest floor. "And no, this cannot be. A tree does not speak," she stammered. But the voice called again, soft, sorrowful, full of longing. "Adaora, help me." The basket slipped from her hands, hitting the ground with a dull thud. Adora's hands flew to her mouth, stifling a scream, but it escaped anyway, high and piercing, echoing between the ancient trunks. "Mama, father, someone help me," she cried, stumbling backward. Her legs moved faster than she could think, and before she realized it, she was running. Twigs scratched her arms and legs, roots tried to trip her, but she did not care. The voice of the tree followed her in her mind, calling, begging, whispering sorrow that twisted her stomach, yet she could not stop. She burst out of the forest just as the last glow of the sun disappeared, the shadows of the trees stretching long behind her like dark fingers. She ran straight through the village, past huts and market stalls, past startled villagers who shouted, "Adaora, what is wrong?" She could not answer. She could only scream, her voice raw and panicked, her eyes wide with terror. When she finally reached the safety of her compound, she dropped to her knees, gasping, tears streaming down her face, her heart still pounding. It spoke to me, a tree, crying, calling my name, she cried, clutching her chest. Ugoma's eyes narrowed, and she stepped closer, wagging a finger. "What nonsense is this? You are mad, girl. Trees do not cry. Stop this foolishness, or you will learn what it means to disobey." Adaora shook her head, panting, trying to make them understand, but the words would not come out clearly. All she knew was that deep in the forest, she had seen a sorrow unlike any she had ever known, a sadness that spoke to her very soul, and in that moment, she feared, and yet something inside her stirred, a strange curiosity that would not let her forget. That night, after the fire had died down and the moon hung low over the village like a silver god, Adaora lay on the cold floor of the kitchen, her thin blanket doing little to keep out the chill. Her body still trembled from the sight she had seen in the forest, and though she tried to close her eyes, sleep would not come at once. The darkness seemed to press in on her, and in that stillness, her thoughts carried her back to the crying tree. Soon, she drifted into a dream, and it was no ordinary dream, but one that felt as real as the earth beneath her feet. She found herself standing in a clearing, the moonlight shining through the tall, twisted branches. Before her, a man appeared, taller and more handsome than any she had ever seen, his skin shining softly, his eyes dark and full of sorrow. But what drew her attention most were the chains wrapped around his legs, winding into the roots of a great tree. His eyes met hers, and though they were sad, they held a pleading, a longing that tugged at her heart. Then she saw a woman standing behind the tree, her laughter sharp and cruel, echoing through the clearing like the cackling of a hyena. Her hair was dark and wild, her eyes burning with wicked delight. She waved her hands as if she commanded the very wind. And every time she laughed, the chains round the man's legs tightened, the roots twisting and groaning. Adaora stepped closer in her dream, her hands reaching out, but the earth seemed to pull her back, and she could not reach him. "Leave him," she shouted, her voice shaking, though no sound came out. The woman only laughed louder, tilting her head, her shadow stretching over the men like a storm cloud. "Foolish girl," the witch said, her voice like dry leaves snapping in the wind. "You cannot free him. No one can. Not yet." Adaora felt her chest tighten. Tears ran down her cheeks in the dream, and the man's eyes filled with silent sorrow. "Help me," his lips seemed to whisper, but the words vanished with the rustle of the roots. She tried to move, tried to run to him, but she was frozen, as though the forest itself would not allow her to touch him. The wind howled, the roots groaned, the chains rattled, and she awoke with a sharp gasp. Her body shook violently, her heart pounding like a drum in the still night. She clutched at her thin blanket, the cold sweat soaking her hands. It was real, she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. It was him, the tree, the man, the witch. She pressed her face to the floor, trying to calm herself, but sleep had left her, and only fear and longing remained. Before the sun had risen, Ugoma's voice pierced the house like a spear. Adaora, why are you still here? Did you forget the firewood? Are you trying to anger me? Adaora scrambled to her feet, pale and shaking. I tried, Mama, I went to the forest, she stammered. Enough of your excuses, Ugoma snapped, grabbing a thick stick from the wall. You return with empty hands after hours of wandering in that cursed forest, you useless child. Do you think I will allow this laziness? She struck Adaora across the back and arms. And the pain made her cry out, Please, Mama, I tried, Adaora whimpered. But Ugoma was relentless. Adora's father sat under the mango tree, watching quietly, his face pale and silent, afraid to speak, afraid to intervene. Adaora sobbed, the sting of the blows mixing with the memory of the dream, the sorrow of the man in the tree, and the cruel laughter of the witch. The sun rose higher, casting golden light across the compound, but there was no warmth for Adaora, only the ache in her body, the fear in her heart, and the memory of the man who called her name from the shadows of the forest. Even as she washed her tears and tended to her wounds, a small, trembling voice whispered inside her mind, I will help you. Somehow, I must. And though she did not yet understand how, the seed of courage and curiosity was planted, ready to grow, even in the cold shadow of Ugoma's cruelty. The next evening, after the long day of chores and the endless scolding from Ugoma, Adaora felt a strange pull in her heart. The memory of the tree, its trembling leaves, and the sorrowful sobs of that unseen voice would not leave her mind. Her fingers itched to touch the rough bark, her eyes searched the dark corners of the compound as if the forest itself called to her. When Ugoma dozed off in the firelight, muttering about yams and cooking, Adaora whispered to herself, I cannot stay. I must go. I have to know. She slipped quietly from the house, careful not to wake the children or the stepmother, her small feet making no sound on the red dirt. Her heart pounded in her chest, a drumbeat of fear and longing that seemed to echo in the empty night. As she approached the edge of the forest, the shadows of the trees stretched like long, reaching arms. Her breath came fast, her palms were slick with sweat, but she took a deep, trembling breath and stepped into the darkness. The forest was alive in a way she had never noticed before. The wind whispered through the leaves, carrying the scent of earth and moss and something sweet, almost like distant flowers. The path was tangled with roots and fallen branches, but she moved slowly, carefully, each step guided by the memory of the sound that had called to her the day before. The further she went, the quieter it became, until all she could hear was the beat of her own heart. Then, from the deepest part of the forest, she heard it again. A soft, sorrowful sound, almost like crying, but gentler than the day before. She froze, clutching her basket tightly, her legs trembling. A small voice spoke in the darkness, and it made her skin crawl and her heart leap at the same time. Do not be afraid, Adaora, she gasped, her eyes widening as she looked around. Who is there? She whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. The rustle of the leaves seemed to gather into a shape, and she saw the familiar, enormous tree standing before her. Its bark glimmered faintly in the moonlight, and the sap that had run down its trunk before now glowed like tears of amber. I heard you yesterday, Adaora stammered, stepping closer, her basket forgotten on the ground. You called my name. But why do you cry? The tree's branches swayed gently. Though there was no wind, a voice, soft and gentle this time, spoke directly into her mind, wrapping around her heart like a warm blanket. Do not fear me, Adaora. I am more human than you think. I have been trapped here for many years, but my heart is still alive. My soul still feels, and I have waited for someone with a heart as kind as yours to hear me. Adaora's eyes filled with tears, part from fear, part from wonder. You can speak, she whispered. A tree cannot speak. I am not just a tree, the voice said, low and trembling with sadness. I am a prince, cursed to live in this form by one who hated the choices I made. But I have lived alone too long. You are brave, and you listen. That is why I speak to you now. Her small chest heaved. A prince, she said, disbelief and curiosity mingling in her voice. But, trapped in a tree. How can this be? The voice was patient and gentle, like a father comforting a frightened child. All will be revealed in time. But for now, know that I am real, and that you are safe here. Do not be afraid, Adaora. You have nothing to fear from me. Adaora knelt slowly before the tree, her fingers brushing against its rough bark. She could feel something warm, almost like a heartbeat, beneath her touch. I am not afraid, she whispered, her voice shaking. I want to help, if I can. Your heart is pure, the voice said, soft as the wind through leaves. That is why you have been called here. Do not turn away from what destiny has placed before you. And for the first time in her life, Adaora felt a strange sense of peace, as if the forest itself had wrapped her in its arms, telling her that though the path ahead was unknown, she was no longer alone. Her heart still pounded, but it was no longer from fear, it was the quickened rhythm of hope. Adora's fingers rested lightly on the rough bark of the great tree, her eyes wide in wonder and fear. The gentle voice that had soothed her before now spoke with a weight that pressed into her heart, a sorrow so deep that it made her own chest ache. Adaora, you must listen carefully, the tree said, its leaves trembling as if nodding with each word. I am not as I seem. I am no ordinary tree. I am Prince Obinna, heir to a powerful kingdom beyond these hills, a kingdom of wealth, wisdom, and warriors. Once, I walked as a man among men, beloved by my people, destined to rule with justice and courage. Adora's breath caught. A prince, she whispered, stepping closer, as though the weight of the word might break him free. But, how can a prince be a tree? The tree sighed, a sound like wind passing through hollow wood. Many years ago, I faced a choice I thought I could make with my heart and honor. There was a woman, Neddy, a witch of this village, feared by all. She demanded that I marry her, saying I could not refuse, that she would bind my fate forever if I did. But I saw her heart, Adaora, cruel, evil, without mercy, without love. I could not give myself to such darkness, not for power, not for life itself. So I refused. Adaora shivered. And she cursed you, yes? Obinna's voice rumbled softly, like distant thunder. Enraged by my defiance, Neddy unleashed her wrath. She turned my body into this tree, wrapping my very soul within these roots. She bound me to this forest, so that none could find me, so that I might rot here for all my days, a prisoner of her fury and her magic. My people believed I vanished, lost to the world, but I remained, unseen, unheard, waiting for a heart brave enough to see me as I am. Is there no way to break it? Adaora asked, her voice small, trembling. No way at all. The leaves rustled, as if the tree shook with emotion. There is one way, the prince said softly. Only true love, freely given, can break the curse. Love that is not asked for, love that is not earned through fear or duty, but love that comes from the heart without question. That is the only thing that can free me from this prison of bark and root. Many have come close, but none have dared to see beyond the shape I wear, beyond the sorrow that clings to me. Adaora pressed her forehead against the rough trunk, her hands trembling. But, how can anyone love a tree? Obinna's voice was gentle, patient, full of warmth and hope. Adaora, it is not the shape that matters, but the heart. And your heart, I can feel it. You are kind. You are brave. You have suffered yet you remain gentle. That is why I speak to you. That is why you are here. You are the first to listen, the first to care, the first to see me as more than a prison and more than a curse. Adaora pulled back slightly, her eyes filling with tears, a mix of fear and awe. Prince Obinna, I don't know if I can help you, but I will try. I will listen. I will not run away. The tree's leaves rustled softly, and a sap droplet fell like a tear onto her hand. That is enough for now, Obinna said. You have taken the first step. In time, you will learn the rest. But remember, Adaora, this path is not safe. The witch still watches. Her anger will not fade. Her darkness will follow, and only the courage of your heart can see you through. Adaora nodded, swallowing hard. I will be brave, she whispered, more to herself than to the tree. I will not run, not again. And in the quiet forest, under the silver light of the moon, the crying tree seemed to soften, the tremble in its leaves easing, as if hope had returned to a soul that had known only sorrow for many long years. Adaora turned to leave that night, her heart pounding, her mind alive with questions and fear, but also a strange, thrilling certainty that she had found someone worth every risk. Each day, as the sun began to climb over the hills and the village stirred with the noise of children running, goats bleating, and women calling across the compound, Adaora would wait for the moment when Ugoma's eyes turned heavy with sleep or when her father nodded off under the mango tree. Quietly, she would slip from the house, basket in hand, moving like a shadow along the red dirt paths, past huts and fields, past the whispers of neighbors, until the forest swallowed her whole. She did not know why she was drawn there each day, only that something inside her ached to return to the tree, to the voice that had called her name, to the sorrow that seemed both alien and familiar. When she arrived, the tree seemed to lean slightly, as if recognizing her, its leaves swaying gently. Adaora, the prince would say softly, his voice like the wind through the branches, you are here again. I could not stay away, Adaora whispered, her fingers brushing against the rough bark. Her eyes bright with tears. The forest, it calls me. And you call me too. Obinna's voice was gentle, patient, and full of warmth. Tell me, Adaora, speak freely, I am here to listen. And so day after day, she would sit beneath the tree and pour out her heart. She told him of Ugoma's cruelty, the long hours of fetching water and cooking, the endless work in the fields, the insults that cut deeper than any stick, the nights spent on the cold floor while the rest of the house slept comfortably. No one sees me, she would whisper, her voice trembling. No one cares. I am only a shadow in my own home. The prince would listen, nodding with a sorrowful understanding. I see you, Adaora. I see all that you endure. You are not a shadow. You are strong, even when you do not feel it. Your heart is brave, and your spirit has not been broken. That is rare, and it is precious. Sometimes, she would cry, and he would murmur words of comfort. Your tears do not make you weak, he said. They show that you feel deeply. That is not a fault, but a gift. Never let anyone make you believe otherwise. Then slowly, he began to teach her not with harsh commands, but with gentle guidance and stories of the world beyond the village. He told her of royal ways, how leaders ruled with wisdom, how they listened to their people, how courage was shown not through anger but through justice. A queen, he said, does not command with fear. She commands with the strength of her heart and the clarity of her mind. She knows her worth and the worth of those around her. He taught her to hold her head high, to speak with confidence even when her voice shook, to value her own thoughts and feelings. You are more than what others say you are, he said one day, the sap dripping slowly like tears from his bark. You are a daughter of the earth, strong and capable. You have a mind and a heart that can change the world, if only you believe it. For the first time, Adaora felt something she had never known in her small, beaten life. She felt seen, truly seen, and in that gentle, listening presence, she felt loved. Not the cruel, conditional love of her stepmother or the silent pity of the villagers, but a love that honored her heart, her courage, her very soul. Prince Obinna, she whispered one evening, as the sun dipped behind the forest and painted the leaves in gold, I feel that someone finally sees me. Someone cares. Someone believes I am worth more than I ever thought I could be. You are Adaora, the tree replied softly, and one day, the world will see it too. But for now, know this: you are enough, as you are. You always have been. And with those words Adaora rested her hands on the rough bark, feeling the pulse of life beneath her fingers, the warmth of his spirit in every trembling leaf. And a quiet, steadfast hope began to grow in her heart, a hope that she had never dared to dream before. Her heart still pounded, but it was no longer from fear, it was the quickened rhythm of hope. And when she turned on to run, fate refused to let her go. Day after day, as the sun climbed high over the hills and dipped low behind the forests, Adaora returned to the tree. At first, she came quietly, whispering only words of greeting, her voice trembling with fear and wonder. But soon, something changed. She began to sing. Softly at first, a tune her mother had once hummed to her, gentle as the morning wind over the red dirt paths of the village. Her voice wove through the forest, touching the trembling leaves, the roots, and the thick bark of the tree. The prince listened, his voice answering in thoughts and warmth, though he could not move, though his body remained trapped in bark and root. Adaora, he said gently one evening, your song, it reaches me more than words could ever do. It is alive. It is hope. She smiled through her tears. I sing because it makes the sorrow lighter. And maybe you can hear it, even as a tree. Sometimes she laughed, a light, bubbling sound that echoed between the trunks, chasing away the shadows and the sadness of the forest. She would spin in the clearing, her skirts lifting with the wind, and the prince would feel it as a warmth spreading through him, as if her joy could pierce the prison of bark and root. Your laughter, he said one day, is brighter than the sun. Adaora, it reminds me of the world beyond this forest, of life and love. Never stop laughing. And sometimes, when the ache in her chest became too heavy from her life in the house, when Ugoma's insults or her father's silence weighed her down, she would cry. She would lean against the rough bark of the tree, letting her tears fall freely, and the prince would murmur softly in her mind, do not hide your sorrow. Let it flow. Let it touch me. I am here, Adaora. I am with you. Her hands pressed into the grooves of the bark, feeling the roughness, the pulse of life beneath, and she whispered, I wish I could reach inside. I wish I could free you. I wish I could hold you. The prince replied, gentle as a breeze, one day, perhaps. But even now, your heart reaches me, Adaora. That is more than enough to keep my hope alive. And so she came every day, singing, laughing, crying, leaning against his bark. The forest seemed to hold its breath as she poured herself into this secret companionship. And in the quiet moments between her songs and tears, Adaora realized something she could not deny. No matter how strange it felt, she had fallen deeply in love with him. Even knowing he was trapped, even knowing he was a prince turned to tree by cruel magic, her heart could not turn away. I love you, she whispered one evening, as the sky turned gold and pink above the forest. Even like this, even if you can never walk beside me, the tree's branches trembled softly, and in that gentle rustle, Adaora felt a warmth, a promise, a heartbeat. And I feel it too, Adaora, the prince said. Your love reaches me. It sees me, even in this form. And though I am bound, your heart has begun to free mine. From that moment, every visit became a tapestry of joy and sorrow, courage and hope. The forest was no longer merely a place of fear and shadows. It was a place where hearts met, where love grew quietly and fiercely, and where Adaora, for the first time, felt truly alive, truly seen, and utterly, hopelessly in love with a prince trapped in the bark of a tree. Her heart still pounded, but it was no longer from fear, it was the quickened rhythm of hope. And when she turned on to run, fate refused to let her go. One night, as the village slept under a blanket of stars and the moon shone silver over the red earth, Ugoma lay awake in her hut, her sharp eyes catching every shadow. She had long suspected that Adaora was hiding something, the girl's quiet defiance, her stolen moments away from chores, her tired yet strangely happy smiles. Ugoma could not understand them, and her mind, filled with suspicion, would not rest. Where are you always going, girl? She muttered to herself, her voice low and dangerous. I will see what you are up to tonight. Silently, she slipped from her mat, careful not to wake her children, careful not to alert her husband who slept under the mango tree outside. The night air was cool against her skin, and her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and curiosity. She followed the faint trail of Adora's small footprints. The girl moving like a shadow through the sleeping village, past the huts and the fields, past the darkened river where frogs croaked softly. She is hiding something, Ugoma whispered, her voice sharp as a whip. There is no reason for her to leave the house at this hour. No reason at all. The girl is up to mischief, perhaps witchcraft. Her steps were quiet but deliberate as she crept closer to the forest, the dense trees swallowing the moonlight, making it hard to see. She paused, holding her breath, and then she saw it. A faint glow, a trembling outline among the thick roots and branches. There, beneath the largest tree she had ever seen, stood Adaora, her face lifted toward the bark, her hands pressed against the rough trunk. Her lips moved as she whispered, and sometimes she sang softly, a tune so haunting that even Ugoma's heart shivered. Ugoma's eyes narrowed. What is this? What foolishness is this child performing? She muttered. She stepped closer, trying to hear. What is she saying to that tree? Who will answer her? The spirits will take her. Adora's voice rose and fell like wind in the leaves. I am here. I am here for you, she whispered, tears glistening in the moonlight. I love you, Ugoma gasped. Stepping back behind the roots of another tree, her eyes wide with fear and anger. She is speaking to a tree, she hissed. A tree cannot speak. This is forbidden magic. She is performing rituals. She is calling the spirits. No wonder the forest is cursed. The girl is trying to summon power she does not understand. She watched as Adaora leaned against the bark, laughing softly at something the tree said, then crying into her hands, her small body shaking with emotion. The girl is bewitched herself, Ugoma whispered, her voice trembling. She is lost. She will bring darkness upon us. I must stop her, before the spirits take her completely. For a long time, Ugoma stood in the shadows, watching, plotting, her mind spinning with fear and suspicion. She had always ruled the house with cruelty, but now her anger mixed with terror. This is beyond disobedience, she muttered. This is witchcraft. If the elders see this, they will curse us all. The child must be stopped, no matter what it takes. And so she waited, silent as the night, watching Adaora pour her heart into the tree, believing that her stepdaughter had crossed the boundary of what was human and what was forbidden, that she was calling on powers she could not control, and that soon the dark forest would swallow them all if something was not done. That very night, after she had watched Adaora disappear into the forest, Ugoma returned to her hut, her mind alive with fear and suspicion. Her thoughts churned like a storm, and no sleep came to her. She paced the floor, muttering, "Girl, she is no ordinary child. Something unnatural calls to her. A tree, speaking, in the forest. No, this is witchcraft, and it must be stopped." By dawn, Ugoma had made up her mind. She would go to Nedi, the witch who had cursed the prince so many years ago. If anyone could tell her what was happening, it would be the witch. And perhaps, Ugoma thought, if she proved herself useful, she could gain power, or at least rid her household of Adora's strange influence. The journey to Nedi's hut was not long in distance, but long in fear. The villagers whispered that Nedi's home was surrounded by shadows that moved on their own, by winds that carried whispers in languages no one could understand. Ugoma, driven by anger and fear, did not hesitate. She carried a small bundle of offerings, incense and herbs, though she did not understand their power. When she reached the clearing where Nedi's hut stood, smoke curled from the thatched roof, and a strange, sour smell filled the air. She knocked loudly, demanding entrance. "Nedi, it is I, Ugoma." "The girl, she is performing magic. Something is wrong in the forest, and it is because of Adaora." Inside, the witch stirred a pot that hissed and bubbled with a dark liquid, her face hidden beneath layers of beads and feathers. Her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, lifted and locked onto Ugoma. "Ah, I sensed you," Nedi said, her voice low and like dry leaves snapping. "You come with news, do you?" "Yes, I feel it. Something is happening." Ugoma's heart raced. "It is Adaora, the girl. She goes to the forest, she talks to the tree. I saw her with my own eyes. She is performing magic. Witchcraft." Nedi tilted her head, her eyes glinting in the firelight. She placed her fingers over the bubbling pot, muttering words that Ugoma could not understand. Then she looked up, her gaze piercing. "I see it now," she said slowly. "The curse, it is weakening." Ugoma froze. "Weakening? What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling with excitement and fear. "The curse that binds Prince Obinna," Nedi said. Her lips curling into a smile both cruel and cunning, was strong. "But it is not stronger than love. That child Adaora, she has a heart pure and brave. Love is." Touching him, reaching him, softening the chains. "She does not know, but her heart is undoing my work." Ugoma's mouth fell open. "Undoing, that cannot happen. She cannot break it. The girl is nothing, powerless." You must, you must. Neddy held up a hand, silencing her. Yes, she said softly. If the curse is broken, my power is diminished. That girl must never reach the point of freeing him. If she does, all is lost. She must be removed. Quickly, quietly, before the bond of love grows too strong. Ugoma's eyes gleamed with a mix of fear and greed. Removed, you mean? Kill her, she whispered, horrified and yet willing. Neddy's smile was sharp and black. Yes, she said. She must die before the curse is broken. No one can know, no one can interfere. If you are brave and clever enough, you will see it done. Fail, and not only will the girl live, but the prince will be free, and my curse will crumble like dry clay. Ugoma's hands shook as she nodded, a cold fire lighting her heart. I will do it, she said, her voice firm despite the terror curling in her belly. I will kill Adaora, before she can free him. Neddy's laughter rose like dry wind through dead branches. Good, she said, go now. Watch her. Learn her ways. Wait for the moment when she is vulnerable. Only then, strike. And so Goma left the witch's hut, her mind swirling with dark thoughts and cruel determination. The night was deep, the forest dark, but a shadow had entered Adora's life, a danger more deadly than any she had known. And a plan had been set in motion that would force her to face terror, courage, and the power of a love the witch and her stepmother could not understand. The next evening, the forest was alive with the gentle hum of night insects and the whisper of the wind through the trees. Adaora crept quietly past the sleeping village, her heart heavy with both fear and longing. She carried no basket this time, no burden of sticks, only the weight of her thoughts and the secret she had carried in her heart for many weeks. She entered the clearing where the great tree stood, its bark rough and dark, its roots twisting like ancient veins, and she knelt before it, trembling, but determined. Prince Obinna, she whispered, her voice soft. Almost afraid it would shatter the night. I have to tell you something. I love you. The leaves of the tree trembled, quivering as though the sound of her words had reached into the heart of the wood itself. A soft rustle spread through the branches, and the sap glistened like tears. Adaora, the prince's voice came, warm and deep, trembling with emotion. You love me. Adaora pressed her hands against the rough bark, her small face lifted to the branches. Yes, she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. I love you, even if you never walk again. Even if you remain a tree forever, I cannot help it. I cannot stop loving you. The tree's leaves shook more violently, and for a moment, Adaora thought the forest itself might come alive. Your heart, Obinna said, his voice low, trembling with both awe and sorrow. Your heart is stronger than I dared hope. You love me, not for power, not for what I was, not for what I could give you, but for who I am, even trapped, even bound, even silent. Adaora, that love, it can save me. Adora's fingers dug into the bark, feeling the pulse of life beneath her touch. Then I will stay. I will be here. I will love you, no matter what happens. I don't care if the world thinks me foolish. I don't care if it's impossible. I will love you. The branches shook, and a deep sigh seemed to move through the tree, heavy and filled with longing. Adaora, listen carefully, Obinna said, his voice soft but grave. What you offer me, your love freely given, is the key to breaking this curse. But know this, the path is dangerous. The witch Neddy, she will not allow it. She has seen the bond forming between us. She will try to stop it, and her magic is cruel and powerful. Your love may save me, but it may cost you your life. Adora's heart skipped a beat, fear and determination clashing within her chest. I understand, she whispered, her voice firm despite the trembling in her hands. I would rather risk everything than leave you here, trapped, alone. There was a long silence, filled only with the rustle of leaves and the distant calls of night birds. Then the prince's voice, soft and full of emotion, came again. Adaora, your courage, your heart, it is greater than any magic, greater than any curse. I have waited so long to be seen, to be loved, and now, in your love, I feel the hope of life itself. Adaora leaned her forehead against the rough bark, feeling the trembling beneath her touch. I love you, Prince Obinna. She whispered again, I will stay, I will not run, I will face anything, even if it means my life. The tree trembled once more, violently this time, as though the very spirit of the prince was stirring within the roots and branches. Then, Obinna said, voice full of hope and sorrow together, then we begin, and though the path is perilous, your heart is the spark that may yet set me free. In the quiet forest beneath the moonlight and the shadows of ancient trees, Adaora stayed, holding her courage and her love tightly, and her heart ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead. Determined that no curse, no witch, and no fear would stop the love that had blossomed between a maiden and a prince trapped in the heart of a crying tree. Her heart still pounded, but it was no longer from fear, it was the quickened rhythm of hope. And when she turned on to run, fate refused to let her go. The night was thick with shadows, the moon barely cutting through the dense forest. Adaora had just whispered her vow of love to Prince Obinna, pressing her forehead to the rough bark. When the air changed, a cold wind blew through the clearing, rustling the leaves violently. And a shadow fell over her. Stop, a voice hissed, sharp as a knife. Adaora looked up and froze. There, emerging from the darkness, was Neddy, the village witch, her eyes gleaming like coals, her fingers twisted with rings and charms. Behind her, Ugoma crept forward, her face twisted in rage and greed, holding a short, wicked blade. You little fool, Ugoma screamed. You dare run into the forest, into forbidden places, playing with powers you cannot control. Neddy laughed, low and cruel, a sound that made the forest itself shiver. So this is the girl, she said. The one whose heart threatens my work, whose love is softening chains I wove long ago. You cannot touch what is mine. Adora's chest heaved, terror striking her heart like a drumbeat. Neddy, please, she begged, but the words barely left her lips before Ugoma lunged forward, blade raised. And Neddy's hands began to weave strange, dark patterns in the air. Sparks of red and black magic danced around her fingers. The forest seemed to close in, the shadows deepening. And Adaora turned and ran, her bare feet pounding against the earth. Her heart screaming, she darted between trees, hearing the witch's laughter and Ugoma's angry shouts chasing her. The twigs snapped underfoot, leaves whipped her face, but she did not stop. Only one thought filled her mind. She had to reach the tree. And then, with a desperate cry, she reached the great ancient tree, the one whose bark she knew as well as her own hands. She flung herself against it, wrapping her small arms round the rough trunk, her tears falling freely. Please, protect me, please, she sobbed, burying her face against the bark. I don't want to die. I love you. The tree shivered violently under her embrace, its leaves trembling as if it could feel her fear, her sorrow, her love. Prince Obinna's voice came softly in her mind, trembling but full of warmth. Adaora, hold on. Your love, it gives me strength. But be careful. The witch, she will not stop easily. Behind her, the witch and Adaora closed in, their forms dark and threatening, their intentions clear. But Adaora clung to the tree, her body shaking, her sobs echoing through the night. As though the forest itself had become a shield, she pressed her cheek to the rough bark, whispering broken words of hope, of love, of courage, even as fear gripped her heart. And in that desperate, trembling embrace, she found a strange, fierce strength, a certainty that no curse, no witch, and no cruel stepmother could take away the love that had blossomed between her heart and the prince trapped within the tree. Adaora clung to the tree, her body shaking with fear and love, her tears soaking the rough bark. I love you," she whispered, her voice breaking, her lips trembling. Without thinking, driven by the courage that only pure, unselfish love could give, she pressed her lips to the tree, kissing it passionately, as though the soul trapped inside could feel the warmth of her heart. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, the forest seemed to hold its breath. A low rumble rolled through the earth, growing louder, echoing in the roots and the sky. Thunder struck, brilliant and sharp, illuminating the clearing in blinding light. Lightning crackled through the trees, casting shadows that danced wildly across the ground. The roots of the great tree groaned and snapped, breaking with a sound like cracking mountains. The bark split down the middle, cracking and splintering as if the tree itself were tearing open from the inside. Adaora stumbled back, shielding her eyes, but she could feel the pulse of life surging from the trunk, warm and real beneath her trembling hands. And then, with a blinding flash and a burst of golden light, the tree split completely open, and Prince Obinna stepped forward alive, human, glowing with a radiance that made the shadows flee. His hair shone like spun gold, his eyes deep and warm, and his strong hands reached for Adaora. "Adaora," he said, his voice trembling with awe and love, your courage, has freed me." The forest seemed to roar with life as Neddy shrieked in fury and terror. Her spells twisted and flared, but the ground beneath her shook violently. Cracks formed, jagged and wide, and the earth split open to swallow her, her screams echoing into the night, fading into the darkness, as though the forest itself had claimed her. Adaora fell to her knees, her face pale, her hands trembling as she watched the impossible unfold. No, this cannot be," she stammered, her voice barely audible, her body collapsing as fear and disbelief gripped her. Obinna stepped toward Adaora, his eyes full of life and gratitude, and took her hands in his. "Adaora," he said, his voice deep and tender, "you saved me with your heart. Your love was stronger than any curse, stronger than any evil." Adaora fell to her knees, overwhelmed with relief, joy, and wonder. I did not know if it would work," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I only knew I loved you." Obinna lifted her gently, cradling her as if she were the most precious treasure in the world. The forest, once dark and silent, now shimmered with life, the tree swaying gently, the wind singing through the leaves. The curse was broken, the witch gone, and love pure, unyielding, and brave had triumphed. And there, in the moonlit clearing, the maiden and the prince stood together, alive, free, and glowing with a light that could never be dimmed again. The morning after the miracle, the village was alive with whispers. Word had spread that Adaora had returned from the forest not alone, but with the prince who had been trapped in the tree. Villagers gathered cautiously in the clearing, their eyes wide with wonder, their mouths trembling with disbelief. Children clung to their mothers, old men squinted in the bright sun, and even Adora's father came, trembling, his hands covering his mouth, unable to speak. Prince Obinna stepped forward, tall, Regal and radiant, his golden robes flowing as if woven from sunlight, he looked over the crowd. His eyes kind but firm, and he spoke in a voice that carried authority and warmth. "People of this village," he said, "I am Obinna, son of the great King Ekin of our neighboring kingdom. I am heir to a throne, but I was trapped here by the curse of Nedi, the witch. For many years, I was bound in that tree, unseen, unheard, until the courage and love of one brave maiden freed me. The elders of the village, wise and knowledgeable in the signs of royalty, stepped forward. They examined the prince carefully, noting the intricate royal markings etched upon his arms and chest, the sign of the bloodline that ruled with honor and wisdom. Their eyes widened as recognition filled them. "It is true," one of the elders whispered, his voice shaking with awe. "These are the markings of Prince Obinna, the heir of King Ekin himself. He has returned to us, freed by a heart pure and brave." Gasps rose from the crowd, and murmurs of admiration filled the clearing. Adaora, kneeling beside Obinna, looked up at him, her own heart pounding, tears of joy streaking her face. I could not have done it alone," she whispered, her voice trembling. I only loved him." Obinna smiled gently, lifting her hand to his lips. "It was your love, Adaora," he said. "Your heart, your courage, your kindness, these freed me. You are as noble as any ruler in the kingdom, and your spirit is what I will treasure forever." All eyes turned to Ugoma, who had slunk to the edge of the crowd, her face pale, her hands shaking. The villagers' whispers now turned to murmurs of anger. She had been cruel, she had plotted against Adaora, and now, the truth of her wickedness could no longer hide. The village elder, his voice steady and full of authority, stepped forward. "Ugoma," he said, "you have caused suffering to the daughter of this house. You have attempted to bring harm to her life and soul. You have supported the work of a witch, and your actions are known to all. Speak the truth now, and confess your cruelty before the people." Ugoma's knees buckled, and her voice trembled as she spoke. I was cruel. I treated Adaora as a servant. I insulted her. I forbid her from joining the village. I followed Nedi. I planned to harm her. I am sorry, but I was jealous. And I was afraid of her goodness. The villagers murmured among themselves, some shaking their heads, some clutching their hands in disbelief. The elders whispered together, their decision unanimous: "For the harm you have done, and for the darkness you brought into this household," the chief elder proclaimed, "you are to leave this village. You will take nothing, and you shall not return. Let your cruelty and malice be carried far from this place, so that peace may reign here again." Ugoma fell to the ground, her face pale and twisted with fear, realizing the weight of her actions. She was banished from the village, cast out into the world with nothing but her guilt and her fear. The villagers turned their attention back to Adaora and Obinna, whose hands now intertwined, whose hearts beat in unison, and whose love had triumphed over cruelty, darkness, and the power of an ancient curse. And in that moment, under the bright morning sun, Adaora was no longer a servant, no longer hidden or oppressed. She was recognized as a heroine, as brave and noble as any prince or princess, standing beside the prince she had loved with a heart true and unyielding. The village, once quiet and fearful, now hummed with life and celebration, a testament to courage, love, and the triumph of goodness over evil. The day of the wedding arrived, and the village was alive with color, music, and excitement. Adaora emerged from her hut, but she was no longer the timid, beaten girl who had run to the forest in fear. Today, she was dressed as a queen. Her gown shimmered with gold and deep red ankara, embroidered with delicate patterns that told the story of her courage and her love. Royal beads adorned her neck, wrists, and ankles, each one a symbol of lineage and respect. Her hair was styled in elaborate parts, adorned with coral beads that glowed in the sunlight. Reflecting the pride and strength of a true Igbo queen, the courtyard was filled with villagers and royal guests alike. Drums thundered in joyful rhythm, echoing across the hills, while dancers moved in perfect harmony, their bodies telling stories of triumph, love, and destiny. The air was filled with the sweet scent of burning incense, the laughter of children, and the hum of elders chanting blessings. Every sound, every movement celebrated the union of hearts and the restoration of hope. Prince Obinna stood at the center, regal in his flowing robes, his eyes bright with love and admiration. When Adaora approached, hand in hand with her father, the crowd fell silent for a moment. Captivated by her presence, she smiled softly at Obinna, her eyes sparkling with tears of joy. I am yours," she whispered, and he answered with a tender bow, lifting her hand to his lips in reverence and devotion. The ceremony followed the traditions of the Igbo people. Libations were poured to honor the ancestors, kola nuts broken in blessing, and songs of praise echoed around the clearing. Friends and family danced, throwing colorful powders and petals into the air, while drums beat in the rhythms of the earth itself. Adora's heart swelled with pride, joy, and love. She had endured suffering, cruelty and fear, yet here she was, crowned in beauty and honor, celebrated by all. A voiceover rang gently over the festivities, carrying a message as eternal as the drums themselves. The girl no one loved became the queen every heart admired. Her courage, her kindness, and her love had broken the chains of a curse, and transformed not only her life, but the life of a prince, a village, and a destiny long forgotten. As the celebrations continued, the closing message became clear, whispered by the wind through the dancing leaves and the echoing drums. True love breaks curses. Kindness attracts destiny. Those who suffer in silence may be chosen by fate. And in that moment, under the golden sun and the joyful sky, Adaora and Obinna stood together. Proof that even the smallest hearts, the quietest voices, and the gentlest souls can change the course of history, bringing hope, love, and light to all who witness it.